Welcome to the TryPod, where we break down the NRL every game, every week from a punting perspective. I'm Jacob Wynn. I am barbecuing alone tonight, something that I'm very accustomed to doing. So, nevertheless, bear with me, guys, because usually we do have Clarkey helping us to steer the ship, lay it all out. But you may have heard Clarkey's given up all rugby league content. He's moving to the USA. He's going to take his savings to Vegas and try and start a new life after obviously what's happened with the Titans this weekend. Now, you may have heard in the recap in that we did a full post-mortem, so I'm not going to readdress everything. But Clarkey's overseas. He's covering the Tim Tszyu fight, in fact, for the next week. I always have all the tipping responsibilities with this show, so that doesn't change. But forgive me if I'm not as smooth or comprehensive with the way that Clarkey lays it all out for us. The team lists have dropped in the last kind of 90 minutes. I've reviewed it all. I've been in the lab and I've come up with some best bets. And this is off a really good round 3. Six best bets was a lot for my style, but that's how I saw it. And we got screwed. And I already whinged in the recap. We got screwed with Brisbane losing Haas after we made the bet, whilst 3 minutes in. We were 1 and 2 on the best bets into Saturday Arvo. The Titans hit that iceberg in Belmore, but we recovered. We finished 4 and 2 on best bets. We hit the mixed matchup. We won the first winning Winnie's Kitchen edition for this season as well at $11, which is very sweet Sunday Arvo. So I'm happy at 9 and 4 best bets. And let's not beat around the bush. Let's share what I like for round 4, shall we? I know that's what a lot of people are here for, and we always share that in the first 5 minutes. Appreciate some comments coming through. So, g'day, guys. I'm gonna try and share my display in a second, but I don't think I need to do that yet. Let me just shoot through. How many best bets did I ultimately finalize? At least 3 to share. And sorry, I should have it in front of me if I went any more. I think I've got 3 best bets to share this week. So let's get into it. I like the Roosters minus 3.5 at $1.87 on 365. Cleary out, and I know you could have got a way better number. And at some point, the line moves so far, you're kind of getting sloppy seconds if you get in there too late. But I think this line could still go a little further. I think it is already at 4.5 in places. The Roosters are the superior team. The Roosters are at home, and Penrith are really going to not only miss Nathan, but they're still missing Crichton. Yes, Penrith looked good last week. Brisbane was in all sorts. The Roosters aren't used to actually being the better team than Penrith. I think they're going to enjoy that. And I think Roosters have been a strong play early this season. They're a different sort of outfit than they have been in past years. On Friday, I am going Broncos, Cowboys, either team to win by less than 10.5. So I think it's under margin, try bet. Either team by 1 to 10. That's $1.82, lads and Neds, Broncos, Cowboys. I just can't split these teams. Reynolds is back, which I think gives Brisbane a chance, as does coming home in front of a massive Suncorp crowd Friday night. I know that no Haas, no Walsh. Saylor's still a good replacement. Cowboys are closer to full strength. That's why I think the Cowboys are the better side, but I think that that's counteracted by Brisbane at home with a big crowd. I really think it's going to be that tight. If Brisbane gets behind, they'll fight back in front of the fans. If the Cowboys get behind, well, they've done it the last 2 weeks. They've fought back. They're not going to have any fear. So it feels like a game that is going to be one score. If I can get either team with up to 10 points, I feel like I've got a strong chance of landing in that 20-point window. And then I'm going to take the Dragons. This could be less popular. They're playing Manly on Saturday, and I'm going to take plus 4.5 first half line at $1.88. Lads and Neds again. And for me, like the Dragons are stronger this week than they were last week, right? You're getting several key forwards back. I think Manly aren't as good as the Cowboys, and the line last week was only 7.5. So you couldn't even get a first half line of 4.5 last week. So why have we got a bigger line? I suppose you could say because the Dragons played so bad last week, but they did have their moments, and the reinforcements make a difference. I know Manly's the better team, but the Dragons are at home yet again. It's a high line for me. And look, Manly were right there against Parra, but weren't ultra impressive either. I don't upgrade Manly after Sunday. I just feel they're about where I considered they would be. The Dragons are never going to be a popular pick. But first 40 minutes, bit of an arm wrestle, perhaps. Kicking game, Hunt versus DCE duel. Look, give me 4.5. I still will lean towards the ugly ducklings this year, probably all year, but especially early in the year when we still don't know that much about all these teams. I'm happy to just take the points because it's not all going to play out the way people expect it to on paper. So those are my 3 best bets. I felt like maybe I had a couple of leans that I'll share in other games. I felt like I almost had 4, but if I've made a mistake, we'll address that later. We'll go game by game. I'll try and interact with your comments as much as I can. So g'day to everyone who's in the house. Jacob saying, Jacob Fathers said I did my father proud there. And plenty of other comments flowing through too. We're on Instagram, the TryPod Instagram as well. Okay, and I'm going to try and share my display to actually put up the markets on the screen so that my ugly mug doesn't take up the majority. But what about the overall theme of the NRL right now? I've enjoyed the season so far, but what I'm not enjoying is the amount of injuries. I mean, Payne Haas, Walsh had a facial fracture. Tino, what happened. Gilbert was preseason. Cleary out this week. That news dropped Monday, as did the news of Mitch Moses. Munster, the mystery injury, the slip in the shower. They don't know when he's back. CNK hasn't returned this year. Lindsay Collins, a rep forward out. The Knights are missing Marzu. Sorensen out this week. Cotter, Murray, they're gun players that are dealing with injuries, although I don't want to say their names as if they're out because they're both named this week. But that list was in no particular order, not complete, all varying degrees of severity, but it does feel really substantial, less than a month into the year, the amount of important outs that we do have to contend with. And I can't put my finger on any particular reason. I think it's just variance and cruel variance at that. Now, let's see what we can do here. So this will kind of freak people out. That's going to share the Instagram display momentarily, but then I can click into the better betting markets. And if I scroll correctly, I think you're going to get a snapshot game by game. So I might put that on the screen. I'll relegate myself to the bottom right corner and we'll roll through these 8 games, hey? And you let us know. Zach said he missed the best bets. So I'll just repeat them all for you, Zach. No, I'm sure someone can catch you up in the comments. Okay, Thursday night, you've heard my best bet is Roosters -3.5, but the line, as you can see there with Better, is -4.5, as it is in several places. Roosters at Allianz. Is this a grand final preview, perhaps, would be my question. The major line move, let's talk about that. So Cleary is ruled out after finishing the game on Friday. He's ruled out Monday. There were some rumors, but the crazy thing is, Barney says forgot to close the hub. What was I? Should have been on incognito mode, shouldn't I? So that line was still available 6.5. And I mean, shout out the Undertaker. He's doing his tip of the week in the TryPod group. Appreciate everyone that contributes there. And he's 3 from 3 and tipped the Roosters +6.5 on Monday. He obviously knew that line was too good to be true. And I mean, I looked at that and went, geez, how are they 6.5 at home? I'd have loved to have a piece of that. Although the way I've been tipping this year, the tips are going great, but the injury luck, I tell you, if I'd been on the Panthers if I'd been on Roosters +6.5, you can guarantee Sam Walker would have failed his HIA and Radley would probably be out. Cleary's hammy would be right as rain. So I haven't had any of these go my way. Nevertheless, if you got on that 6.5 with the Roosters catching points, you're laughing now. The line has moved 11 points. I want to talk about that. That's as big of a line as I've ever seen. We've got, I'm trying to think in the past of any other precedent. Most recently Turbo. I think the form that he was in 2021 vintage, he would move a line 8 to 10 points, and it was justifiable. Manly was like probably a 10-point worse or better team with or without Turbo. I've always likened Nathan Cleary to Jonathan Thurston. I saw a lot of similarities as he's come up, and he's probably going to exceed everything that JT did in his career. And JT had a career for the ages. But JT could move a line, I think, 7 or 8 points in his prime for the Cowboys. And it's not just about how good the player is, it's how important are they to their team. as Nick says, is Cleary worth 11 points? Is anyone? I would say no, Cleary shouldn't be worth 11 points. But in my opinion, that line never should have been plus 6.5. Like, I think the bookies were wrong. So, I didn't have that opportunity. We're here a day earlier than in the past to have a crack. But obviously, I didn't get a sniff at that plus 6.5 with the Roosters. So, if you would ask me on Monday, like, what should that line be? I would have probably said Panthers 2.5, Panthers 3.5 type line. Like that, like I can understand you want to still make Penrith a slight favourite, and the Roosters do have a couple out. Let me discuss those. I mean, Lindsay Collins is out, right? I'm not sure if on Monday it was certain that Sam Walker would be back, but they were successful in downgrading his HIA, so Sam Walker is in, and of course Luke Keary returns too. So yeah, I would have had Penrith as like a slight favourite. And now the line's through to kind of 4.5. So I think it's moved an appropriate amount for Cleary, which would be like 6.5, 7.5 points. We know how great he is, and I've been beating that drum for many years. But you've also got to look at, there are other rep players in that spine. Edwards has played for Australia now. Obviously, Luai's on one of the richest deals of any players ever signed moving forward next year. So you kind of expect that he can take the reins. And when you've got other star players, and throw Yo in there too, a rep lock that can ball play, you expect those players to take on a greater load. So therefore, you don't completely just miss all the drop off of Nathan, because other players can each lift a little bit more. But I think that Penrith are going to feel it. And that's not saying a great deal. So I think that line move is justified, at least moving, say, 7 points, and that maybe it should have been more like 2.5, 3. And now I think it's actually cheap on the Roosters. And when you do move a line through 0 as well, you've got to remember there's some points in there that are basically meaningless, like moving from -0.5 to +0.5. It's less sensitive. So it's easier for a line to kind of flow through. And of course, Scott Sorensen is out as well. So as Michael says, the Undertaker closing line value king. I mean, those are the ones that you love. And like, look, yeah, I think it was a great bet in its own right. And then the Cleary news is just absolute gravy. And again, I don't want to be super late to the party, but I feel like this line could go a little bit further. And I don't want to miss out on a great tip either. And I like the Roosters this year, as you guys know. Tipped them to win the comp, but backed him in round 1. I backed him in round 2. That was a letdown, admittedly. Then they kind of did in round 3 to South's what I was hoping to see on Sunday over rookie. That's all right. In any case, I'm confident that the Roosters are stronger at the beginning of this year than they have been in past seasons. Yeah, a couple of props are out, but they're so deep with like Warrior Hargraves and Terrell May just starting front rowers. That's still not bad. And other than that, you're pretty much full strength. And I look at Penrith, and you've got to remember there's still no Fisher Harris. And there's still adjusting to life without Stephen Crichton. And I just don't know who Penrith throws the ball to make something happen in the outside backs. Like, yes, Penrith could win this game if Luai, Edwards, Yo are in their bag and have a blinder, but I just don't feel like that's going to happen the majority of the time. Whereas if I look at the Roosters outside backs, you know who can really hurt you when the ball goes out wide. And Teddy's actually kind of having a bounce back season, is one of the form players in the comp too, after I was among many people, pointing out he was struggling last year. So final thing for me, Penrith looked great against Brisbane. They're an exciting team. They don't play with any fear, that's for sure. But Brisbane was shocked, given the circumstances that happened to their key personnel. That may have inflated some people's opinions of Penrith. Not necessarily mine. I think the Roosters get them here. I'm willing to lay -3.5. I think Lukey's taken away from the Undertaker, saying you can't give him all the credit there. A bit of luck. And look, luck in terms of players being ruled out and in. As I said on Sunday, it should go both ways. If any of it wants to come my way this weekend, I'd be very grateful. Let's move to Friday. It's Good Friday, of course, which means our footy kicks off in the afternoon. So I will scroll us into Bulldogs, Rabbitohs, and I should really say it in the other order because it's the Rabbitohs designated home team at Accor, and they are 6.5 point favourites. No key outs. I mentioned Murray because I think there was some news out this week that they're managing a knee issue, but apparently it's more of a workload thing and he can play through it. They just got to manage it at training. It's not ideal, but No major changes for Souths, which was interesting to me. Like, does Demetrio kind of shake things up because he's on shaky ground himself? But no, Hawkins remains at 7. He might have done Elias a hell of a favour by sparing him last week. He got to carve up a reserve grade, and Hawkins played on this team that had no hope against the Roosters. And again, we'll find out how much of that was just the Roosters are red hot right now. I hope a fair bit of that, and hopefully that plays out on Thursday night. But what do we make of Souths? I think I've got a shout out. I can't remember who it was in the comments last week pointed out Rabbitohs hadn't covered a line for like 8 or 9 straight games. And now I think I didn't go back and count it, but just doing a scan, it looks like the Rabbitohs haven't covered the line for 10 straight NRL games. And this is where a line adjusts each week based on performance. So that's no anomaly. That's not going to the casino and seeing roulette spin 10 black in a row. That is just a statistical anomaly. But there clearly are internal issues. And until I see Souths resolve it, I don't think I'll bet on them. Like, if there's just a spot that's crying out for me to take South Sydney, and I feel like the line's really cheap, and I feel like this is the week that they're going to give a good account of themselves, I wouldn't be afraid to back any team or back against any team. But this isn't a home run spot for me. I still like some aspects of Canterbury, and I think I hold the Dogs in a slightly higher regard than most other footy followers. So I won't go against Canterbury here because you're getting more than a converted try. However, contrarian, I'm not going to play the Bulldogs when they've just won 32-0. And meanwhile, Souths were humiliated and lost by more than 40. And on top of that, don't you think that Souths are the type of team that when they finally get ascendancy and get their nose in front in a game, then they'll actually take their frustrations out on that opponent and they'll actually run the score up and act like we're all sweet. This is what we're capable of. You could kind of see Souths being a bit of a bully. And it's one thing if you can't beat Brisbane in Brisbane, you can't beat the Roosters at home in Warrior-Hargraves 300th, and even Manly were really good in Vegas. It's another thing if you can't beat the Dogs at home. So this is the type of game where a bully could flex their muscles for sure. But I still lean the Dogs. So it's like conflicting factors for me. Going back to I won't play Souths until they show me something. As for Canterbury, I don't think they know their best 1 to 7 yet. So one I'm interested in watching, that's why I didn't have a best bet on this game. Nothing but Pancake says Dimmy out. And Lee says, love the Dogs. James Graham, shout out the buy round. He says the Sam Burgess curse. Let's move to the Queensland Derby Friday night, where I did dip in for a best bet. And this is probably the first of its kind for this season. I'm taking, remember, either team 1 to 10. But as you can see on the screen, the Broncos are outsiders at home. They are plus 1.5, playing, of course, the North Queensland Cowboys. And that is despite the fact that I mentioned Adam Reynolds is back, which was obviously one of the key factors I was looking into. Is his knee good to go? And you wouldn't think that Brisbane would rush Reno back, but at the same time, they do really need him. So is he coming in underdone? Is there a bit of risk there? You've got to factor that into a degree. But, of course, no Payne Haas. Walsh ended up with a facial fracture because I think we knew about the massive laceration. He was unlikely to play anyway, but it's even worse. It was crazy to me, just on Walsh, he actually passed the HIA. Like, fair enough. Like, not every head injury is going to be necessarily a concussion. So he passes the HIA. But Brisbane wanted him back on the field. They sent him back down there and had him warming up. And the only reason he didn't go back on was because of the swelling was so bad he couldn't see. So you nearly sent back this prized possession onto the field. You were down 20 at halftime, by the way, and he had a fractured face. I mean, they're lucky ultimately that, I wouldn't even say common sense prevailed, but they're lucky that he didn't go back out there into harm's way. I'm not sure. Let me know in the comments if you've heard how many weeks Walsh is out. In any case, Tristan Saylor is one of the best backup fullbacks in the comp. When he got a couple of opportunities last year, I actually thought he had done enough to maybe put himself in the shop window for another club to actually poach him because I think he's that talented. So that's at least something. And when you replace a star player, if you can replace them during the week where you know that's the case, it's not nearly as bad as when you're thrown into haywire and it happens mid-game or in the Broncos case, 3 minutes in. I mean, the whole left defensive edge was in all sorts when Cobbo had to go to fullback and Penrith tore him to pieces down that flank. So this is at least a little bit better. In fact, as I look at the team list, I also notice Corey Oates on the bench. So if you get any more backline injuries, you've got some cover there. It'll be interesting to see how else Kevy may deploy Oates if there are no injuries. And speaking of backline, Labour was a late out for the Cows last week, and they still racked up, 46 or 48 points against St George, and he's back now as well. And I do like the Cowboys generally more than Brisbane. I picked them a few spots higher on the ladder this year. I don't think many others would have seen it like that pre-season. The injuries favour North Queensland even further. The Cows are the only undefeated team in the comp so far, and they've had some poor patches in these games, and they still have found a way to win them. But this game, I just have a real feel that the Suncorp crowd, the Derby energy, it really pulls these two teams together. As Colt says, Broncos head-to-head looks decent. I mean, I would take the start, mate. I'd sacrifice those few cents because I could see golden point between these two. And haven't they played more times beyond 80 minutes than any other pair of teams in the comp in the last, 10 years? I think it's that even because, you look at the strengths of the Cowboys, like, of course, Drinkwater's going to be hard to handle, but Brisbane's got star outside backs too, the likes of Cobbo, Staggs, in the halves with Reynolds and Mann back, could arguably still be a stronger halves pairing than Dearden, Townsend. Robson's a strength for sure, as is Cotter for the Cows, but it's like you still got big, tough carry, Paddy Carrigan there, and plenty of depth for Brisbane, I still believe. So it's like, I don't see either side having a major edge. The atmosphere just lends itself. I talked about Brisbane's behind. They won't give up. Cowboys are behind. They've got so much firepower and they've got so much belief because they were down double digits the last 2 weeks and they won those games. So everything's telling me it's going to be tight. If you're going to press me because maybe you're tipping comp, you want a winner, I think the line's fair. I'll tentatively say North Queensland may win it by 1 or 2. And maybe if Reynolds isn't quite 100%, he could miss a kick. Like that could be the difference in this one. But that's about all I could tell you. So that's why my best bet is either team 1 to 10. Let's move to the weekend. And we've got Dragons hosting Manly, a game I've also got a best bet on, as you know. But the full game line at Winnie Stadium is Dragons plus 8.5. My best bet is plus 4.5 first half with St George. Both these sides are off losses, but St George getting the reinforcements, as I discussed in the recap. I said several key forwards, Molo, Little, Sua back in the starting lineup, and Hame Sele first game for the year, and he'll be off the bench. That's a big boost. Manly were right there against Para for sure. And from what I can see, they haven't changed their side. I really don't have a lot of faith in the Dragons. Like, I was quite shocked when they got out to that big lead against the Cowboys. Again, it would have been a very different game if Fatala Mariner didn't have hands for feet at the worst possible time, or feet for hands, or hands like feet, I could say. That game really did swing on that moment. So there's obviously positives and negatives in that because the Dragons looked really good for about 20 minutes, but then capitulated. I also I'm just building in this element too, that Flano was an assistant at Manly last year. And just knowing the way that Manly works and the way Siebes works and what they try to get to, I do feel like that could be a hidden edge. It certainly can't be a disadvantage to us. So I like that. I know the logical play is Seagulls. Maybe you guys can tell me in the comments why I'm wrong and why you like the Seagulls. Because I would say the same last week, that the Cowboys were the logical side against the Dragons. And I just didn't want to play the really obvious play. And I felt like the Dragons could be a little bit improved at home. And as it turned out, the Cowboys won by more than 20 points. You didn't get it all your own way, but if you played the logical side, you won. But if I go back to that game a week ago, like I wasn't rushing to play North Queensland minus 7.5. North Queensland are better than Manly. I mean, tell me if you disagree, but I feel pretty strongly that that's the case. The line's bigger than it was last week, but St George are also better than they were last week with the 4 forwards back. So for me, like I think this line should be like a 6. So I could play the full game line, but if I think the line should be a 6, I think the halftime line should be like a 2.5, and I'm getting 4.5. And those 2 points over 40 minutes of footy, that's how I see it. That's an edge that's worth taking for me. So that's why I've played St. George. Call me a Manly hater if you like, because this will be the third straight week I'll be betting against Manly. But to put it in a different perspective, I've had a best bet on every Manly game so far this year, and I am 2-1 picking the outcome of those games. I don't think there's going to be many weeks this season where you're going to be like, oh, St. George are a great bet. I'm highly confident in St. George. They're just that type of ugly, gritty team that you're never going to feel can take a game away from anyone. But I know that they can bring other teams down to their level. I talked about the Hunt DCE chess match, kicking duel, a bolstered Dragons pack, home fans. I think there's an equal share of chances in the first 40, so I'll take my chances with plus 4.5. And that will take us to Saturday night, where it is formerly known as the Winnie Clarkey Cup, but we've actually pulled out a naming rights this year. So it's now called our best middle forward did his ACL Cup. Sigh. So that's the Titans plus 2.5 at home, hosting the Dolphins, who, off the top of my head, this is where I love having a live audience because you can let me know, you can help me out. Off the top of my head, were the Dolphins ever a favourite on the road last season? I really can't think of a single game where they would have been road favourites. I do recall them going down to Wollongong, playing the Dragons. Maybe that was a pick'em. Maybe the Dolphins were ever so slight favourites. I know I was on the Dragons that day and the Dragons won comfortably, but this is kind of new territory. The Finns being, they did go down to Newcastle, and Newcastle was absolutely decimated very early in the year with injuries. But I don't know if the Dolphins started favourite in that one. So it's not a common occurrence, that's for sure. You understand why. Tino tragically out for the season, as we know. There is some good news, though. Looking at the lineups, Jaden Campbell's going to return, so he takes Keanu Kinney's spot at fullback. And then I do spy David Fafita in the reserves as well, which is positive news because that pec tear, you didn't know how long that could drag on. Whether he's back or not this week, seeing him in the reserves is something, right? Now, Tanner Boyd just flinched and spilt his dinner when I scrolled down the page, but he still remains at halfback, and at least he doesn't have to face kick-out this week. That's something. The Dolphins are off the bye. I think that's partly why they're a favourite here, but let's just, for what it's worth, look at how the bye has treated teams so far this year. You had the Tigers idle in round 1, pumped in round 2. You had the Titans idle in round 2, pumped in round 3. So that's not me saying the bye is a bad thing, but just probably worth noting. I'm kind of split on this one. JK says Dolphins halftime, full time. Yeah, I actually look at, and people can chuckle away at me what I'm about to say. I could only play the Gold Coast in this game. They're 0-2. They come back home. Do we get injured player theory? And for those who aren't accustomed to that notion, the idea that when one of your very best players is out, the market is going to shift against you. The line is going to increase or what have you, move against your side. But if it's just a short term, when a really good player is out, you see the other players lift a little bit, like I spoke about what may occur with Penrith, and therefore the team actually plays just as well. That can't be sustained long term, of course, because if you could play just as well without someone, you wouldn't pay them $10 million for 10 years. But in the short term, you can see a side cover up some holes, and I could see that occurring. Like, everyone relies on Tino so much in this teams. Now he's not there. It's like incumbent on others to step up. And I just don't feel great about the Finns. I know they looked quite good against the Dragons, but make of that what you will. They dismantled the Dragons, so I guess that's also worth noting for me. Like, these teams have a common opponent, and when the Titans played the Dragons, they got pumped by 28 or 24, and when the Dolphins played the Dragons, they beat them by nearly 40. So if you're going to draw a form line through those, then you will pick the Finns by plenty. I just don't think it's going to play out that way. I think it will be a lot closer. So the Titans for me are probably a bit like Souths. I'm not just going to keep backing them each week because I think there could be value. I'll wait and let them show me some signs of life. As Lou Jalen says, recency bias for sure. I think the Titans probably are the sharp side, but do you want to keep being on the sharp side, but maybe something internally is rotten, like with Souths? And I fell victim to that late last year. I was on them too many times, South Sydney. So, and half of the losing best bets this year have been on the Titans. So I'm not going to give them a chance to add to that this week. If you want me to tell you who I think wins, I'll go Finns by a field goal. Like, wouldn't that just pile onto Clarkie's pain after the Finns won narrowly both encounters last year? And of course, after the Titans start to this year, that's the only way it could be worse. They've been blown off the park after 2 games, and then the Titans could actually play well and respond this week, but just lose a narrow one. That could happen. I don't have a tip on this game, but Nicole does. So let's have a listen to who he's picking in terms of a try scorer play.
Hey guys, it's Nicole from Wiki. Look, I'm 0 from 3 from my tips on this potty so far this season. Pretty disappointing, but super excited about this one. So Mark Nichols, he's scored 5 times in his last 41 games since 2022. He scored just last round, and he's up against the Titans with no Tino. So I absolutely love this tip. I love Mark Nichols as a try scorer. He's $11 to score anytime on Bet365. I'm waiting for some juicy first try, second half odds to pop up for him to tip him there as well. But for now, love Mark Nichols, $11 to score a try anytime on Bet365. Always, guys, punt responsibly. Google Wiki Linktree for our Discord, our tips from our podcast and article, odds comparison tool, and everything else. Enjoy yourselves.
Thanks, as always, to Nicole. He's going the GOAT there. So 5 in 41. What's that, like a 1 in 8 strike rate? But he's getting 11s, and he likes the match up there as well. So that's juicy. You don't have to have much on that. Of course, you can build Nicole's tips into same game or as Nicole said, like if someone's paying 11s to score anytime, you're going to get some mega odds if you can actually pick first try, second half, whatever. So get across to wiki.ai for all of Nicole's tips and the odds comparison tool, the beauty, and the punters preview article lays out the players they like and the odds that you can get. Let's move to Saturday, Saturday night. Sorry, I don't want to misspeak. Are we still? No, sorry, Sunday. It's a little bit different because we've got the Monday game. We've just got a doubleheader on Saturday. So this is Sunday daytime at Mount Smart, New Zealand, a -7.5 hosting the Newcastle Knights. And this is a finals rematch of the game that the Warriors did win emphatically in the second week of the finals last year. Both these sides were 0-2 last week, and both got off the schneid, which was great because both were best bets of mine. So I was happy to see that. In terms of the lineups, RTS is starting at fullback, which is where he finished the game for the Warriors on Friday. Tuapiki was ruled out. CNK still unavailable. Niokore is back in the lineup. And Wade Egan too, if you believe that third time named is a charm. We'll wait and see, I suppose. Leo Thompson got 1 week for that challenge on Pappy. In the moment, geez, it was scary. I don't know how much Thompson did wrong because I do believe he had his eyes on the ball, and yeah, he was as shocked as anyone that when Pappy flipped over his head. But I thought the ref could overreact there and give a sin bin or even a send-off. And how nervous would Newcastle have been if they'd lost Thompson at that stage of the game? The Storm, in any case, cut it to a 2-point game. So the Knights are probably lucky that no further action was taken on the field beyond a penalty, and he'll sit out the trip now, but they will miss him at Mount Smart. I thought both these teams should have won by more than they did last week, but New Zealand got on top and made it. The game was too close against Canberra, and similar for Newcastle. But I feel like they were both probably just nervous and they didn't want to give the game away last week. Because if you recall, New Zealand and Newcastle both did just that in round 2. They gave away games they should have had. I think they were back-to-back on a Saturday, wasn't it? Newcastle blew that lead in North Queensland, and then you remember what happened to New Zealand down in Melbourne. So I think there was a bit of nerves last week, but they got the win coming into this one. It's interesting to me that this line's 7.5 when in the finals last year, I recall it was 5.5. So it's has New Zealand gotten better relative to Newcastle this year? I suppose Marzu's out, but CNK's out. Egan might not even be playing. Jaden Brayley has returned. He's playing off the bench. Capewell is a nice addition for New Zealand, but I can say the same about Kai Pearce-Paul. I don't probably rate either of these teams as much as I did at the back end of last year. I felt they both had awesome seasons last year, but it's another thing to actually bottle that up and repeat it. So I'm yet to be convinced. I think the line feels a little much for me, so I'll lean to Newcastle. But I don't want to bet against New Zealand in New Zealand unless I really rate the opponent. So remember last year I was like the only person for a lot of the year saying the Knights were good. This year I'm a bit more lukewarm on Newcastle. So I think the Warriors should win, as Joey Wu says. And I'll pass in terms of the line. And I'll move us along to Sunday night, where it's Sharkies Raiders. I'll bring up the graphic. Last I looked, the Sharks are a 4.5-point favourite. And that is despite being without Dale Finucane, Royce Hunt injured on the sideline last week. Toby Rudolph is out as well. Iro in the centres is one to watch for me, and they've moved Talakai to the second row. For Canberra, Gula out, Chris back in the centres, and Horsburgh. Someone explain this one to me. I didn't realise he was actually eligible to return last week. I thought he must have still been suspended last week, but Horsburgh's eligible to return from suspension, and he's still in the reserves. Was that Ricky just going one step too far, saying you don't change a winning team? I feel like you got a rep forward there. At least bring him back via the bench could have really helped. Surely Horsburgh's back this week, right? Which would bolster the Canberra pack. The line does seem a little low, though. These are two teams. It's the opposite of the previous game. These are two teams that were 2-0 and then both lost last week. And I bet against them both last week, and I was happy to do so. Although I will say, Canberra impressed me, impressive in defeat in New Zealand, whereas the Sharks were awful. But I have to say, Leichhardt was rocking. The Tigers were tossing it all over the yard, barely put a foot wrong, and you're going to get nights like that. So I don't massively downgrade Cronulla after last week. I probably didn't rate them as highly as others going in. So I agree for sure. The Sharks have got to be favourites in this one. And I think that line's cheap. Like, I could easily see the Sharks winning by a converted try. But you have lost 3 quality forwards, and Canberra's pack's potentially going to be stronger. It just doesn't quite get me there. You know that Canberra can make it ugly. So that's why I hesitated and I didn't quite pull the trigger for a best bet on that one. Which leads us into how are we doing for timing? Yeah, I mean, I thought it would be a little shorter. Hopefully still getting across enough information for you guys to make it worthwhile, but you don't want to hear me talking for too long either. So I've just got one more game to cover, and that is on Easter Monday. And it is the Parramatta Eels at CommBank hosting the Tigers. Parramatta are 6.5-point favourites. Obligatory mention of that game was it 2 or 3 years ago, where Jackson Hastings' field goal for West to get their first win of the year killed every multi in existence that weekend, after I think every other favourite had won. Everybody had Parramatta, some form or another. Of course, West spoiled the party. The big news into this one, I already alluded to earlier, Mitchell Moses is out. He's got a fractured foot. So Dylan Brown shifts to 7. And then our man who brought home Winnie's Kitchen at 11s last week, Blazing Talangi, he's going to shift from left centre last week into the 6 jersey. They do also get back Mike Acevo, which helps you facilitate that left backline shift. While West have no major changes, maybe 12 off the bench. I think 12 might have got an injury, but nothing major. Both are good wins, but both impressive wins last week. Obviously, Tigers won by a bit more than Para, but Para I thought played at a higher level against Manly. I was happy with them. And Para's still the more complete side over West. I'll be really curious to see how the Tigers respond in terms of backing up last week's display, because that's going to be the challenge that Benji sets for them. Like, you've shown what you're capable of. Now you have to do that week in, week out. The truth is there's no way the Tigers can do that week in, week out. It doesn't work like that. But here's my overriding take for this game. And I just haven't bet totals for a few years. And I've explained it before. Like, there's only so many bets I can, compute in my mind. There's so many angles. I feel like if my lane is trying to pick teams to do well and beat the spread more often than not, that's enough. Without, I don't get too much into anytime try scores, for example. Totals, we're used to in the past, we did really well. But I just feel like going into a game, I can really feel good about like Parramatta to beat Manly or Newcastle to beat Storm. And I know they both only won narrowly, but I felt good about that. When I bet a total, I feel like it's just so sensitive to like one opportunity being taken or bobbled or intercept try. It just feels like I can't personally be as confident on a total. Now I say all that to say this: if there's any game where I would consider betting the total, it's probably this one, Eels Tigers, and it would be the overs. And what really jumped out to me last week was these two teams offloaded the ball all day and all night. They were both just so willing to toss it out the back. And when you run into contact and three players are tackling you, you pop an offload. Like to me, you've just generated an extra tackle. So if you can do that multiple times in a set, you're suddenly playing like 7, 8 tackle sets, essentially, what you're making the defense have to withstand. And again, offloading is going to help offense for the most part. Like, yes, there could be a time where someone like Bryce Cartwright forces an offload in good ball territory and throws away an attacking set. But offloads can lead to either try scoring opportunities or errors. And often the error can then spill back the other way and give the other team a bit of a counter attack opportunity. So if both teams are going to definitely push plenty of offloads, and I see no reason they wouldn't because you stick to the similar formula, I think over 44.5 is pretty good play. So not an official play, but I'll give you my lean and my reasoning for that one. In saying that, I still think Para, should be too strong. So, you could also play a Para overs or something like that, or factor that into your same game. But that could be a decent candidate for a game where you can actually pick 2 or 3 guys to score a try, because there could be a few on offer on Monday. I'm not sure when I'll be back, but what I will tell you guys, if you do enjoy the live recap, I actually think I might squeeze it in straight after Warriors Knights on Sunday, just because I think there's like a 20-minute gap between Warriors Knights and Sharks Raiders. And if it's just me doing the solo recap, I can get in there. And look, that means there'll be 2 games I won't cover, but I can speak about what we have seen unfold over the weekend. All my best bets will have played out. You're looking for the mixed matchup. We haven't heard from Tristan for a few weeks, so he is back this week, which will make me able to negotiate the mixed matchup in the period of time just after team list. So you'll get used to the mixed matchup being part of the show again in coming weeks. We'll get some insights from Tristan again. But for this week, the mixed matchup will still get posted in the Facebook group, and it'll still appear under Rugby League Markets on Toppy. So look out for that. And shout out to Better as well. I got to hit my same game on there sooner or later. So Friday night, usually by Friday, I've released, well, you'd hope it'd be by Friday for Friday night. But yeah, Thursday evening, Friday daytime, that same gamer will be out by me. And Winnie's Kitchen, what do I serve up for an encore to last week? I'll release that video again kind of Friday evening for something that I'm finding tasty this weekend. Thank you to everyone that tuned in and stuck it out with me. I hope you all have a great week. I'd love to know what you like in terms of punting this weekend, so let me know in the comments. And Lego.